Okay, so I was asked to speak today on innovation and how to make it a habit in your organization. Now, I want to ask you guys, what is the difference between innovation and creativity? Just shout out an answer. Or what do you think, like, define innovation or creativity for me? Go! Say something, Mom.
Creativity is expressing yourself and not having to live within certain boundaries.
Okay, what's innovation?
Coming up with a new idea.
Coming up with new ideas, good. Well, the definition, according to Harvard Manage Mentor, which is a good website for you guys, pretending that you're Emmersion Learning is my audience, a good website for managers or anybody who's really trying to improve their organization. Creativity is the process of developing new ideas, right? However, innovation is the embodiment of those knowledge and those new ideas into something that's relevant for your organization, into relevant action.
So it's taking creativity a step further.
Yeah, exactly. It's taking it a step further. It's applying it. Because you can be completely creative and not be innovative if you don't ever put into action the things that you're innovating into your new ideas. There's some misconceptions about creativity, however, and I wanted to focus on creativity because although I know that you guys asked me to speak about innovation, creativity is at the heart of innovation, right? You can have creativity without innovation, but you can't have innovation without creativity. So if you want to make a habit of innovation, you have to make a habit of creativity. And some misconceptions about creativity are that the smarter you are, the more creative you are. Not true. Number 2 is that the younger people are more creative than the old. Also not true. You disagree?
No, I agree. I think that as we get older, we get more.
Yeah, you can definitely become more set in
Yeah.
your habits as you become older, but it's not a fast rule, right? No. Another misconception, is that creativity is reserved for really flamboyant and outgoing people, which maybe those people are creative, maybe they're not. It's not. They don't have a monopoly on creativity. Another misconception is that you have to be alone to be creative. It helps certainly in some cases and may help some creative people to be creative, but that's not the case for many people. That's not the case. And the last one is that you can't manage creativity. You can't improve on it. You can't force it. You just kind of expect it to come down from heaven like the Spirit, you know? But that's actually the one that I want to focus on the most, because if we want to make a habit of innovation, we have to be able to manage creativity and make sure we're encouraging creativity on a daily basis in our work environment. Keep going. Oh my goodness. Come on. Okay, so because of that, I'm going to address four steps to consistent creativity in the workplace. The first step is to evaluate your workplace needs. And now this is important because every workplace has different employees and has different needs for their organization, right? And in Harvard Manage Mentor, it says that when different thinking styles come together, then creative sparks fly. That is the insight behind the phrase creative abrasion. Creative abrasion meaning, who knows what abrasion means? Do you know what that is?
Like
abrasive?
It roughens it up.
It roughens it up. What is rough about it, though? Like, if you didn't touch it, you wouldn't know it was rough, right?
Yeah, so it's a feel of it.
Yeah,
you have abrasion
you
on
have
your
to
leg.
feel. You have to rub the two against each other, right? And so when you have different people in an organization who think different ways, that thinking rubs against each other. And that is, yes, that's when the sparks of innovation and creativity fly. To innovate, businesses need creative abrasion. I already said that. Sorry. One way to encourage creative abrasion is to fill out the checklist that I handed out, which I would hand out to you if you were my actual workplace that I was presenting to. Another way is to address different kinds of intellectual diversity and make sure that those kinds of diversity are inside the organization. There's diversity with personality types. There's diversity diversity in terms of culture and religion and race. There's diversity in terms of like what college major and what educational background you have. I want to focus on Myers-Briggs type indicator really quick because I think it's a really good way to evaluate exactly how your thinking style is and how it works with everybody else in the organization. So let's say everybody in your organization, it turns out that you guys are all introverts. Well, it might be time to hire someone who, or you guys are all extroverts. It might be time to hire someone who's an introvert because that will bring some more creative abrasion. You'll be able to see things from a new perspective and come up with new ideas. And there are four kind of ways you can evaluate yourself on Myers-Briggs. I'm not going to get into them here, but I just want you to know that it's a really simple way to kind of take a quick snapshot of how your workplace intellectual diversity is coming. And you can go to 16personalities.com for a quick test on that if you're curious. It's really interesting. The next step is to enrich your workplace physically. This is actually a photo of the headquarters of YouTube, and instead of stairs, they have slides for grown-ups. Because they realize that that one of the things that you need in order to be creative is to enrich all your senses, including the physical environment. Another thing that's really important that plays into the physical environment is to make sure that you're encouraging casual conversations, right? Do you have places for people to meet casually, like by the water cooler, in the kitchen, outside the bathroom, you know? These are places where people are going to have casual conversations. And one way to enrich that would be, let's say people are spending a lot of time by the water cooler. So find a little whiteboard you can get at the dollar store, right? And stick it above the water cooler with a little marker, and then if someone has some random idea while they're talking about something, they can sketch it out right there by the water cooler instead of having to go all the way back to their desk, you know? Just having little things like that in places where casual conversations are will enrich your physical environment. One example of a place, I know one of the companies that I found, what they did is they made sure that they widened the staircases in their building so that people could have room to stop and chat on the staircase. You know, because creativity won't come when you're just sitting at your desk. You have to go out and do something and talk to people and have different ideas from your regular life instead of just work in order to have creative sparks fly. Another example is Facebook. Facebook actually has the largest open floor plan in the world. They have over 3,000 employees at their headquarters, and guess how big their floor plan is? Square footage. How big is it, do you think?
50,000.
50,000? 480,000.
Holy cow.
Open floor plan. And look, Mark Zuckerberg himself is walking around there, right? And this is really good because it's encouraging casual conversations. Instead of walls, you have people facing each other. And they do have some private rooms just in case people, like we said, different intellectual styles want to work privately. But nevertheless, a large majority of it is where people can come together and joke around and build friendships. Because without that friendship, people and camaraderie, people aren't going to feel comfortable enough to share their ideas even if they have them. The third step is to enrich the workplace psychologically. And the good way to do that is through motivation. And what's the difference? What do you think is more important, extrinsic or intrinsic motivation in motivating employees?
Well, the goal is intrinsic.
The goal is intrinsic, right? So which one is more effective then, do you think?
Well, if they have it, intrinsic.
If they have it intrinsic, yeah, that's true. And so really, really, it's actually, you need both. You need extrinsic and intrinsic motivation, right? If you have too much extrinsic motivation, then your employees are going to lose sight of the real goal, right? They're just going to do it for the money, essentially, and they might cut corners and not really be passionate about it. No creativity is going to come out of someone who isn't passionate about their work, right? So too much extrinsic isn't very good. However, intrinsic motivation is really hard to get, but there are some ways that you can encourage intrinsic motivation and ways to replenish it, because intrinsic motivation, just like just like creative energy needs to be replenished. It's like when you're tired, you can't just stay awake forever and ever. You have to replenish that energy, especially if you're narcoleptic. Well, motivation and creative energy is the same way. You have to replenish it. You have to fill your gas tanks, essentially. Some ways to do that are with, one way to do that is with recognition. Just giving a speech and highlighting someone, or giving someone a plaque or a trophy, and just recognizing, making sure that they feel recognized for their accomplishments. Another way to do it is to give someone control or responsibility over a new project. When people are in control of something and they feel like they're being entrusted to be responsible, then they have more, especially something that they care about, they will automatically have more creative ideas because they're suddenly filled with, oh, I could do this, I could do this, I could do this, right? Another way is to celebrate, or to have a party, right? And this is just an easy way to encourage those casual conversations like we were talking about, and to give people a break. And the last one is to rejuvenate, which is essentially to give people time off from the task and to give them a break and to let them chill out for a while. Lastly, the last step to encourage creativity in the workplace is to foster techniques, or to encourage and employ techniques that foster idea generation. And the one that I want to focus on is divergent versus convergent thinking. Have you guys seen the movie Divergent?
No, I want to.
Do you know what divergent means? What does divergent mean, Mom?
It goes out.
It goes out. What do you mean by that?
Convergent comes together.
Okay, good. Divergent goes out and convergent comes together. And so, in terms of thinking and brainstorming, divergent would be, divergent is when you are trying to find as many possibilities as possible, right? When you're doing the initial brainstorming phase. Richard Pascal said, and he's the principal of Pascal and Brown, which is a business consulting management company. He said that you need to remember Einstein when you're engaging in this divergent thinking process. Honor the thought problem, not just the answer and the hypothesis you want to confirm, which would be kind of that blinding, having your blinders on like you were talking about. Because in the question and in the willingness to wade around in the periphery of the question, not just in the center of it, are often the real discoveries that are breakthroughs. Some techniques for brainstorming and to making sure that you're not getting too close-minded are visioning, like imagining the ideal solution. If you had unlimited time, unlimited money and resources, what would you want to happen? Another technique is to explore. Use symbols, analogies, make a Pinterest board, make a scrapbook. Just explore different ways of thinking of a situation and looking at it in order to challenge assumptions. And the last way is to modify. Start with what you have, especially when it comes to what your customers and clients need. And think of, if you were your client, what would you want to improve? Like with the Emmersion, they have this language assessment, right? That they can give to, that they're trying to sell to different companies, so that these companies can evaluate if they're hiring someone to speak Spanish, they can evaluate how well they speak Spanish. But if you were a company looking to buy that from Emmersion, to buy that software, what would you most notice? What would you most want to improve? That's modifying. So these are all divergent, right? And convergent then comes next. That's when you're bringing it all together. And some ways to do that, this is narrowing it down, right? And finding the idea that you're really going to stick with. Some ways to do that is by asking questions like, what are cost constraints? Or what are your time constraints? These are really practical questions that can really quickly narrow it down to just a few options, right? What are your essentials versus nice to have, especially in terms of a customer? Because sometimes you may think an idea is really cool and super creative, and you may think, wow, this is the best idea I've ever come up with, but it may not be what your customer needs. It may just be what's nice for them to have, you know? They may actually need something completely different. And what are your criteria from, what are criteria that you can apply from your mission and values? So Emmersion Learning, some of the missions, values from their mission statement are personalizing and customized learning, and diagnosing and assessment before treatment, and utilizing technology innovations like Skype to help people learn. Some values from their values that they have listed on their website are being a team player, being an entrepreneur, having a solution mindset, and always upholding the truth. So if you apply the filter of each of those values to that list of creative ideas that you had, which ones don't fit them, which ones go fly in the face of that, then you can quickly cross them off, because you know that they will not be what your organization needs and what matches your values as an organization. So lastly, who remembers the 4 steps? Or who remembers at least one step?
Oh, the psychological.
Okay, yeah, enrich the workplace psychologically. That's one.
And the physical.
Enrich the workplace physically. Good. And what was?
Big slide.
Yep. Evaluate your workplace needs.
With a little whiteboard.
Yeah. And then what was the last one? The divergent and convergent. What was the name of that one? Do you remember?
Thinking. Brainstorming.
It was just the tools.
Okay.
It was just employing good tools that will help foster innovation.
Okay.
I know that if Emmersion employs these 4 steps, they will be on the road to having consistent innovation in their workplace day to day, and even when business is slow, or even when Emmersion thinks that it's just sailing and it's doing really well, that's the time that you really need to start doing these habits for when it's slower and when you need to have innovation, especially as a startup organization. And I won't say in the name of Jesus Christ, because this is not a talk, but the end. Clap.